There are these very sharp contradictions which you could describe as false religion. Recently, a book has been published which contains the speeches of Imam Khomeini, and in that there is a beginning speech which was on the Arba'in, that is the 40th day after the movement began in Iran against the Shah, the final mass upheaval. You know that it began in Qum, in the city of Qum, and people were killed over there. And on their 40th day, Imam Khomeini, the 40th day of mourning after their martyrdom, he gave a speech. And that speech talks actually about false religion. And that was the right time to give that speech because there were people in that time who were exploiting religion. For instance, they would say that, why fight against the Shah? Because, there is some saying which is attributed to the Prophet. I don't know whether he actually said that people have those rulers whom they deserve. So Iranian people deserve the Shah. Why fight against him? That kind of false religion, and Imam Khomeini talks about that in that speech on the first Arba'in. Then the last speech in the same collection is again the 40th day, but after that last Ashura before the revolution took place, if you're familiar with the chronology of the revolution in Iran. And here he's talking about totally different issues. He's talking about the economy, distribution of wealth, stopping the flight of wealth from the country, creating committees which would give the people the things which they need at a time of tremendous scarcity, supervision of the agents of the old regime, and so on and so forth. So at that time, in that last Arba'in, that last 40 days of mourning after that last Ashura before the revolution, the people had learnt what the true religion is. In other words, the true religion is to stand up against the forces of tyranny, to stand up against forces of oppression, to deny the authority of all those who follow any force other than Allah. That is, to deny human authority and to accept divine guidance. That is the true religion. But we find that there is a lot of false religion in many parts of the Muslim world, as it was in Iran before the revolution, that people are involved in minor issues. For instance, recently when the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came, only a few months back, Ayatollah Muntaziri gave a suggestion that the Muslims of all sects should celebrate this birthday together, so that they should come together, regardless of their historical sectarian separations, they should come together to celebrate this birthday. A response to this was given by some governmental scholars in Saudi Arabia. I don't like to use the word Saudi Arabia, because you see, no land belongs to any human being. Land belongs to Allah. Let's say Arabia, which is ruled by the Saudi family at this time, they gave a ruling saying that it is against Islam to celebrate the birthday of the Prophet. This is bid'ah, innovation in religion. And I heard later on a very interesting response to that which came from Iran. And that was that, how is it that on the one hand, when the Muslims want to unite, somebody from Saudi Arabia comes up and says that this is bid'ah, this is innovation in religion, while on Christmas, about which there is no definite proof that it is the birth of Jesus Christ sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Saudi oil minister gave a gift to the United States. As a result, you know that there is a tremendous oil glut going on all over the world. So you can give that gift to a power which is threatening the independence of Muslims all over the Middle East. And at the same time, on that other issue, which is even uniting the Muslims, you can come up and say this is bid'ah. So this is how false religion works. That religion which attempts at dividing the people and keeping them divided so that they should be ineffective. If you are interested in this Shia-Sunni issue, while I was in Iran, I was, because I belong to a different school of thought, I was questioning people about this, and I was telling them people are saying these things about you and so on. So I found one very interesting account which explains a lot. You know, in the west of Iran, there are these two provinces, Kurdistan, which is Sunni, and Azerbaijan, or West Azerbaijan probably, which is Shia. And in that he says what they used to do, this friend of mine who explained this story, gave this story to me, he says that what they used to do, that among the Sunnis, the Shah's government had brought this about, that the Sunnis would have a sort of celebration of happiness on the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. Just to create that very strong resentment among the Shias. While in Azerbaijan, where the Shias were living, they would celebrate and have happiness and celebrations and joy and so on the martyrdom of Umar radiallahu anhu. So that, the Kurdistani people should be very upset and provoked. And he said that this has been going on for a long time. It cannot be very easily put an end to. Very deliberate way of provoking and cutting the Muslims off from each other. The last time I went to Iran, not this time, but the one before that, in the first year of the anniversary, when things were still fresh, I went by a Pakistani airline, and in Paris I had to renew my ticket, so I went to the Pakistani International Airline. So I asked them if you have any literature about Iran. And they had a little brochure in French, which had been published during the time of the Shah. It was still old, you could see the various cabarets and so on in the brochure which are available, That when you go to Iran, you go to such and such cabaret, it has the best nightlife and so on. So in that, I found that it said the religion of Iran is guess what is the religion of Iran? Shiism, not Islam. According to the Shah, the religion of Iran is Shiism. See, this is, of course, a very effective way of cutting off that country and its people from all other Muslim people. The similar things were being done by Jamal Abdel Nasser and Sadat in Egypt. That they were saying that Egypt has a very old civilization. It is not just Islam that we are proud of. That is, of course, our history. But it goes back all the time to Pharaoh. You see, we have a very old civilization. Similarly, in Turkey, Ataturk came and said, well, Islam was just a historical incident. But actually, our history goes back to the Turanian times when we had very large civilization, etc., etc. So these are ways of dividing the Muslims which are used by various forces. Then the other interesting thing which I found over there, with which I think I will conclude, is that there is a spirit of caring for other Muslims. For instance, there is a tremendous feeling there for Afghanistan. They all feel, and this is expressed strongly, that the struggle in Afghanistan is their struggle. It is not something which is the struggle of somebody else. And they said that the only reason why we cannot go and fight there just now against the Russians is that we are fighting on another front. And there are all the Mujahideen groups are represented, the genuine Mujahideen groups of Afghans who are fighting against the Soviets. They are represented in Iran, in Tehran, as well as in other cities. Especially in Qom, I found that Afghan Mujahideen are very strong. So much so that they and their Iranian supporters, they were shouting slogans there in the streets, welcoming the guests, and they were giving out very large cartoons about Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And they have, this slogan, of course, is very well known, neither the East nor the West Islamic Republic. So I used to think this is just a slogan, but when you go over there, then you really find that how the government there is trying to put the fear of the superpowers out of the hearts of the Muslims. That they not only shout Marg bar America, but they also shout Marg bar Shoravi, which means down with Russia. Every time they shout Marg bar America, they also shout Marg bar Shoravi. And on the Russian embassy there, on the walls of the Russian embassy, I found in red letters, very huge red letters saying Marg bar Shoravi. And on the final day when we had this sort of an audience with Imam Khomeini, one of the things which he emphasized, he said that all these Afghan Mujahideen and their representatives are here in Iran, and you should meet them and find out for yourself what is going on in Afghanistan. So my summing up of this talk is that there is a tremendous upheaval taking place in the Muslim world. Some of it is known to us, some of it gets known to us through various incidents. But there is hardly any Muslim country about which you could say that its people are asleep. The people everywhere are waking up. So in that sense, the future of the Muslim world belongs to the Muslim people and not to those little elites who have been ruling them for the last so many 100 years. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Thank you very much for your patience, and I'd like to have your questions now. Do you want me to take the questions myself, or would you like to?
We have about half an hour for the questions. If any of our brother and sister have any question, please make it short. I myself had a question for you. When I talk to some of our Muslim brothers from another country, they seem that they are a little bit worried about the news that they are getting from the news media here about the executions and the torture in the prison and stuff like that. I was wondering if in your trip you had any discussion or research about this.
Well, one thing, of course, was very evident, that Iran, Muslim Iran, has suffered a lot. There has been a tremendous amount of suffering, and any other movement, Muslim or non-Muslim, would have collapsed under that kind of suffering. When you go to Bahisht-e-Zahra and other cemeteries over there, you see there is firstly the war, which has been going on for more than a year. And thousands of people have been killed in that. Especially in the cemetery outside Ahvaz, I noticed that how much the people have been touched by that. So their near and dear ones have been killed. Then there is the internal problem, that there are very, very small groups inside the country who would like to impose their own will on the people, and who would like to put an end, completely topple the Islamic revolution, and by violence and by sheer force, just destroy it physically. This has also led to tremendous losses among the Muslims. Some of their best people have been killed. As you might have heard, that in one night 73 people were killed. And then the elected president and prime minister, they were burnt to cinders in their own offices. Their bodies were unrecognizable. They could be only recognized from dental records. And there has been a tremendous amount of suffering. This is one thing which has not been conveyed successfully, even by Iranians themselves, outside Iran. So Iranians have taken that in a, should we say, courageous way, what has happened to them. But they have undergone a lot with that kind of fragile, it's after all a small country. It's a third world country with 35 million people. And that has been sustaining these blows. An invasion, sustained invasion from outside, which is supported by almost every country in the Middle East. So almost every country in the Middle East is supporting that invasion. And on the other hand, there is this internal convulsion, which is carried out by small groups, deadly groups, who are, they are under centralized organizations, and they go out in their little killer squads, assassination squads, and just in cold blood they go and pick off the Muslims, especially those who are the religious figures, and try to bring down that system in that way. And many of those people have been captured, and they have been tried by revolutionary courts and executed. And that, as you are aware, has been used to give to smear the name of Iran outside Iran. And you constantly hear of the executions which have been going on over there. But it is unfortunate that the other side of the story has really not been heard. It has not been conveyed to American people or people in any other part of the world successfully, even by Iranian Muslims, unfortunately. if there are any more specific questions about that, I'd like to answer those.
Yes, I have a question about how do you foresee the revolution in other Muslim countries like Sudan or Morocco or Saudi Arabia? Since what I've been reading in the press magazines and papers says that since there are different sects of Islam, so there won't be any revolution in those countries. Now, since we know that all the Muslims believe in the same thing, I don't think that's true. But how do you foresee that? I mean, do you think that what happened in Great Mosque would happen again, or what's happening in Sudan would continue, and American or other superpower would intervene in those countries in order to prevent revolution?
Well, there were very few people who would deny that these countries, the rulers in these countries, are maintaining their power through, firstly, brute force, and secondly, assistance from overseas, which in itself shows that there is unrest. You see, for instance, in a country like Pakistan, my country, you hear very little about it over here. And sometimes unobservant people, when they go there and they come back, they say everything is okay, everything is going fine. So I asked them, is there martial law in force? They say yes. I asked them, are assemblies of 4 or 5 or more people permitted in the streets anywhere? They said no. Are political activities censored or not? They said yes. So I said, how do you say that everything is okay? So there is a tremendous amount there which is not okay at all. And especially, you see, the difference between Iran and other Muslim countries is that in Iran, the Muslims are in power. The great majority of the people, they are in power, while small minorities are trying to topple them by force, by killing their leaders. While in the other countries, small minorities are in power, while the Muslims are the ones who are oppressed and suppressed. So I would say again that there is hardly any country about which you could say that there is no possibility of revolution. See, the word revolution itself, it scares people, and especially in America, it has a very different kind of connotation. But it simply means that the people of those countries would like to shape their own lives themselves. There is no reasonable person who would like that somebody should come from outside and impose himself on him and decide what his life is going to be. To stand on your own feet, to get rid of dependence, to have your own future in your own hands, that is a very natural human thing. The only thing is that because Muslims live in a strategic and important part of the world, there are powers who would not like them to stand on their own feet and who would not like them to have their wealth in their own hands. For instance, at this time we find that the wealth of the Muslims is being squandered. Take the case of Arabia itself, that the people of the Middle East, the people who are Muslims in the Middle East or in Asia or in Africa, they are being denied even the basic necessities of life in many cases, while their wealth is being squandered or is being invested in the banks of those who are their worst enemies. So when circumstances are such, there can be no doubt that there is going to be upheaval unless the Muslims decide to go back to sleep, which of course there is very little possibility. You know that there was upheaval in the Muslim world even at that time when there was no successful Islamic revolution. But now you find that there is a successful Islamic revolution. And as a result of this, Muslims in all parts of the world have become very bold and courageous. And they can see that things can be done, that you can topple even the most powerful ruler. You know that the Shah was the most powerful ruler there was in the Middle East. And his government was the showcase of imperialism in the Middle East. And still it was toppled. So that, of course, possibility cannot be ruled out at all now.